And a bit about today's agenda. So during today's event, we will be learning from FIT-funded small and medium-sized organizations and local partners who will be sharing their experiences, applying practical strategies for the prevention of sexual exploitation and abuse during their short-term testing projects. To start off, we'll provide some information about FIT and our own PSEAH requirements, followed by presentations from our two groups. Then we'll move into a panel discussion with our speakers, followed by a question and answer period. So now I would like to introduce my colleague and co-moderator for today's session, Dil Rajaratna, FIT's Program Officer Gender, to provide a brief overview about our program. So over to you, Dil.
Thank you so much, Madeline. Thank you so much, Madeline. And so, hi, everyone. So before starting the presentation, I would like to let you know that the focus of today's event is to provide a practical insight into the application of PSEAH and to share the experiences from FIT-funded SMOs and their partners related to PSEAH. So please note that this session is not intended for discussion on legal aspects, policy specifics, processes, or critiques of unique situations. So with that, I will start our presentation. So let's start from FIT. So what is FIT? So the Fund for Innovation and Transformation, which is also called FIT, is a program of inter-council network of provincial regional councils, which is called ICN, made possible through funding from Global Affairs of Canada and administered by the Manitoba Council for International Cooperation, MCIC. So this is a national innovation fund focused on testing innovative solutions that will advance gender equality. FIT is also aligned with FIAP and guided by the Whistler principles. Next slide, please. So far, FIT has funded over 11 million CAD to testing projects in 33 countries, supporting 54 Canadian SMOs. And 52 projects out of 54 have been already completed, and 47,818 women participants and 26,755 men participants have directly impacted through FIT-funded projects. Next slide, please. So, what is PSEAH? So this is called Prevention of Sexual Exploitation, Abuse, and Harassment. The letter H is representing harassment, and this has been newly added to PSEAH as it is now a key consideration. PSEAH focuses on preventing and responding to sexual misconduct by personnel towards beneficiaries, while safeguarding covers broader protection against harm, abuse, and exploitation of vulnerable individuals. Both Canadian and local organizations should have a PSEAH policy fulfilling the FIT requirements. And if you already have a PSEAH policy, it should align with the FIT requirements. Next slide, please. So get PSEAH Code of Conduct requirements. Here, as per subsection 22.6 of Global Affairs of Canada Contribution Agreement, there are several requirements to have a complete PSEAH as mentioned below. The first one is the Code of Conduct Integration. This is about accountability mechanism embedded throughout the organization, with roles defined for monitoring and compliance. Next is the reporting mechanism. This is about anonymous, confidential reporting and investigative procedures for all sexual exploitation and abuse allegations. You should also have a mandatory prevention and remediation training for staff. As for disciplinary actions, there should be a clear measure for addressing serious misconduct. In addition to that, you should also include a written code of conduct provided to all personnel and partners. Here COC means code of conduct. And finally, there should be a local partner compliance, which means partners must either sign an attestation to respect the code of conduct or adopt aligned policies. So, FIT requires all funded SMOs to have a PSEAH code of conduct or policy aligning with GAC requirement as described in this slide. Next slide, please. In addition to those things, I would like to explain some basic minimum standards of PSEAH. And number one here is the scope. So you should have a scope. So according to this, your PSEAH should apply to all personnel. For examples, it could be employees, contractors, local partners, etc. And also it is important that both at national and local level, this partner should be there. And under the partner compliance, your partner must either sign an attestation to respect the policy or adopt their own PSEAH compliant policies. And accountability is also very important for the PSEAH. So here you should describe the roles and processes to ensure compliance and monitoring of the policy. Next, your reporting should be anonymous, confidential, and fair investigative procedures for sexual exploitation and abuse allegations. You should also have a mandatory PSEAH prevention training, and that is important. And finally, I would say that you should mention the remedial actions, which means the clear measures for addressing misconduct. So with that, and if you have if your PSEAH does not meet the FIT requirements, our team is there to help you with our expertise. Yeah, I would like to tell about that one too. And with that, shall you go to the next slide? Yes, okay. So with all the information, I will wrap up the FIT PSEAH requirement presentation. And now I would like to hand this back to Madeline. So it's over to you.
Thank you so much, Still, for that presentation and for providing a bit more context on our program, our own PSEAH requirements, and how that will feed into our event content shortly. So we have a couple of presentations from SMOs that FIT has funded, along with their local partners. So we'll be getting into those very shortly. It's now my pleasure to introduce our first group of speakers from Waterlution, Dawn Fleming and Karen Kuhn. Karen is the founder and president of Waterlution, and Dawn is Waterlution's innovation lead. They tested an innovative solution together in Mozambique with their partner, Girl Move Academy, to see how capacity building and water innovation workshops embolden and empower adolescent girls to design permaculture solutions that address sanitation and water challenges. So Karen and Dawn, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Hi, FIT team and everybody joining. Very nice to meet you here. So my name is Karen Kuhn. We don't have a lot of time. We're very excited to share with you what our FIT funded project was, but we're going to move through it fairly quickly because we want you to have the context of what we tested. But obviously this is a PSEAH focus and the context is going to be very useful so that when we get into this, the discussion later, you'll have that context. So please know Dawn and I have practiced to move through this with a degree of speed. So yes, Waterlution's been around for 21 years and we work in the Global South. And the project we're going to talk to you about today was tested in Mozambique. So if we can move to the next slide, that'd be great. Okay, so here we are in Northern. I love seeing these photos again. Looking at our focus was adolescent girls and empowerment through capacity building and water innovation. For those of you that know Mozambique, this was in the greater Nampula area. And I love that you've got a photo. I know we put it in the presentation, but I forgot about it. But this was in part of the capacity building was the adolescent girls working on actually building prototypes of, to really get their creativity going and to get them sort of into the project. Next slide, please. So here was our hypothesis. If adolescent girls aged 12 to 15 receive capacity building in leadership, water innovation, and permaculture connected to critical challenges of scarce water resources and poor sanitation in their schools, they will be better empowered to participate in decision-making about which responses and innovations could develop in their school grounds, incentivizing school attendance, boosting confidence, and creating shared gender transformative value for the community. So now I'm going to hand it over to our innovation testing lead, Dawn, who's going to take you through the big main beats of the project and a lot of what we learned. Dawn?
Thank you, Karen. Hello, everybody. And so carrying on, the testing methodology was structured around three sort of key moments. So we developed a capacity building program in partnership with our local partner that was focused on, with the facilitators who were called Girl Movers, focused on innovation, systems thinking, solution design, WASH, and permaculture. And then we worked with them, education and local consultants, to adapt that material for the local context. And then those facilitators who had been trained applied the workshops with the support of our team to two schools, delivering the workshops to the adolescent girls who in the local language are called Marusis. And then we had the third moment of the program, which was around a community celebration, really giving light and visibility for the young girls to present their work with visibility and recognition from the greater community. Next slide, please. So in terms of background, and we pulled out some key points around the local context that are important for this discussion today around gender and around WASH, water, sanitation, and hygiene. So you can see that there are high percentages of adolescent girls who have early pregnancy, that the chances of young girls becoming single mothers before turning 30 are extremely high, very low rates of university completion, and that the responsibility of girls in our age focus group have the primary responsibility for seeking water and distributing water within their families. And then there are significant health and economic implications of that on their lives and their families' lives. And in terms of WASH, there are high open defecation rates in this particular community we were working in, and that more than more than 3/4 of the population don't have improved sanitation facilities. So we then did a bit more of a breakdown about the specific neighborhood families, and you can see the structures and the infrastructure, the wash and water and sanitation infrastructure that they had in their homes. Next slide, please. So the beneficiary groups, we worked with 100 of the Marusis and 5 university-educated facilitators who were the girl movers, who had been trained first to then deliver to the 100 Marusis. So they both were direct beneficiary groups, and the indirect beneficiary groups spanned the community and the family members and all of the relevant school and local government representatives, as well as the water concessionary, which is extremely important in terms of impact and outcomes, and as well male students who received other ways of being engaged with the gender-focused program. Next slide, please. Highlighting some of the reasons that the approach was innovative, that the young women were at the center of the process, and those were the most effective and affected and involved with the specific challenges of the region and the WASH challenges, and that it was totally made in a collaborative manner, and that we were looking to have a systems change approach, looking to and successfully implemented a system change approach that was gender transformative, and that there are education and gender policies in place that Mozambique has put, and that this was supportive of those and working towards them. Next slide, please. I'm not going to read all of these. I'm looking at the time and we're down to nearly 6 minutes. So I want to get to the PSEAH part. Lots of lessons learned in terms of ownership and leadership, and we have continuing impact. You can try and dash your eyes through some of these slides here, points. Next slide, please. And the notable results from this were that in the short term, an extreme increase in knowledge and community engagement skills, increase in attendance records and activities that increased confidence, and that their needs, their wash and hygiene needs being met in the school setting also increased, and the dropout rates reduced. So the hypothesis was proven successful. Next slide, please. And we've arrived. Karen, I'm going to pass it back to you. Thank you.
All right, great. So all of that context was important because of the role that our PSEAH, and we know the H has been added, so PSEAH, sort of played in the development of the proposal that then obviously got funded and what that meant. So our partner selection, so we've mentioned Girl Move. It's based in Portugal, but with their main global south operations are in Mozambique. And so working with Girl Move, their PSEAH capacity was very strong. So what was wonderful as a Canadian SMO, we learned a lot from them, and their PSEAH working on a permanent basis in the greater Nampula area was robust. And so it really complemented our PSEAH, and their PSEAH really complemented each other. But in our partner agreement, with them, this was very detailed. And as we worked on our proposal, we worked to understand each other's PSEAHs, and so how that would be applied, and what would be some of the key pieces of that, and what were the infrastructure or communication lines that would be what were the practical points of the PSEAH. And so we needed to understand that. It was in COVID as well. And so normally under FIT funded projects, you go to the country and work there, whereas that was an added detail, but in some ways was good. There wasn't a lot that was good about COVID, but what was good about it was that we had to really have these detailed conversations so that we can understand that sort of in this kind of format. Whereas, it was very focused PSEAH development. Dawn, I think I'll speak to the next one and then I'll hand them back over to you.
Super.
So very briefly, our current PSEAH is our third iteration. And so as we've learned more, we have updated our PSEAH through board meetings, board approval, learning from our partners. We still have an office in Lebanon and working with UNICEF there. So this wasn't FIT, but just to give another example of the very stringent process that they had. And so it really continued to up our PSEAH game because we had to meet certain very specific requirements. And so that led to our current third iteration. We don't call it that, but it is our third iteration of our PSEAH. Okay, Dawn.
Thank you. Last 22 seconds. The onboarding and training element of our PSEAH process is significant. And so we adapt for each of the local contexts with specific case studies that and a look that addresses real contextually relevant circumstances that could that need to be alerted. And the sisterhood circles are a built-in structure within our partners' mechanisms, which is about creating intergenerational spaces where young, more mature, and adolescent women can speak in a safe setting, in a consistent manner that then doesn't require an additional focus or an additional conversation to happen. It already creates the mechanism of safe spaces for women to share experiences. And that was an anchor for the implementation of the PSEAH policy, our partnered PSEAH policy. I'm going to stop. We have so much more to share, so we look forward to your questions, and thank you for the extra 48 seconds.
And I just want to say very quickly that for time zone reasons, that is why you're getting Dawn and I and not our local partner. But I know our next speakers have their local partner, and we would have loved that. It just was complicated to make that work for today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen and Dawn. That was really interesting to hear more about your testing project and I really appreciate your community involvement in both your testing as a whole and in your PSEAH. And I respect the difficulty of presenting about your project within 10 minutes, so I'm excited to get into that more during our panel discussion. Great. So we'll be moving into our next presenter group now. So I'm pleased to welcome our next two presenters, Adrian Wiebe and Etta Mueller. Adrian is the International Projects Manager with Change for Children, and Etta is working as a Change for Children field staff member from Nicaragua. Change for Children and their Nicaraguan partners tested two innovative solutions funded by FIT to advance gender equality through education and environmental conservation activities in the Bosowas Biosphere Reserve. So please welcome Adrian and Etta.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you. We'll just start with the next slide, please. Actually, Madeline already said all this. So there's me, and then there's Etta. Etta's joining us from the town of Bilwi, which is on the Caribbean coast of Nicaragua. So she's coming in from a distance. Okay, next slide, please. And I'll hand it over to Etta. She's going to share a little bit here.
Buen día, mucho gusto y
Good day, a very happy and grateful for the opportunity to be here. All the efforts and the best thing about this is all of us that are here present, we're here with the same work and battle with this, with everything that has to do with protection with the PSEAH, and I love it. I love being here at this moment. It is going to be a challenge in regards to time because we have so much to share, but well, I will begin sharing with you a little bit about the context about Bosawas in Nicaragua, where we have been implementing FIT. Bosawas is a tropical forest to the northeast of Nicaragua, and we are in the most remote areas of Nicaragua where we are lacking so much of resources that limit us in so many ways, including education and the most basic services. And there is a high number of poverty. Next slide, please.
Next slide, please.
We can see here on the map where we are located and the projects where we are present within 7 indigenous communities in the Miskito, India, Maiskaiskagum. You can see here in the blue where you see MITK, that is the territory that has an estimated population of 24,400, and it is a bordering area with Honduras, which makes us even more vulnerable with this issue. Next slide, please.
So I'll just share briefly about our first project. We had 2 FIT funded projects. Thank you very much. The first one was done during COVID, similar to Waterlutions, and it was around testing offline technology for education. We were able to establish in 7 nucleus schools along the river there tech classrooms using solar power because there's no other energy there, and digital libraries and classroom laptops to provide high quality educational resources in schools that had basically no resources. And we also had to focus on teacher training, capacity building for gender equality and sexual and reproductive health rights, and education, mother tongue language educational materials, and collecting and gathering local cultural and linguistic materials that were uploaded on the digital libraries. Next slide, please. So this is just a outline of the kind of technology we used there. So you can see what we did. We used the Rachel Plus, which is this digital library that has a signal that can be shared within the whole classroom with classroom laptops or tablets. So that was basically that project. Next slide, please. Etta will tell you about our second one.
Podemos ver ahora
Well, now
el
you can
segundo
see
proyecto
the second project, our second FIT project, regarding local knowledge and global goals. The goal with this project was to increase the ability of the that is sensitive in regards, or that is regarding the forest, but also how women were going to be part of this project. So here we started with the sessions, workshops, and increasing knowledge, which is the base to be able to build a defense. And so increasing knowledge about this subject to be able to prevent and protect all of these things that have to do with gender and equality, harassment, and girls, small girls were also very important to be able to include them in the training and understanding that have built context for these different communities. And this was very important because this also had to talk about protecting our forest and our Mother Earth. And this was a very important piece of our project because within Indigenous communities, protection of our Mother Earth was something that we had that was part of our community since before integrating FIT project, but also women, young women was something that was important to us, and to be able to train them in regards to mapping and using technology, and they were able to work together with the park rangers, which mostly are men, but they were able to obtain an increase of knowledge about how they can also not only protect themselves against harassment and abuse, but also the men that were part of this were able to participate so that they can understand respect and how this is part of it. And also, we were able to provide a lot of support to the elders, to women elders, because they are the ones that help with women's health in their communities, and her always also helping the younger women in regards to births, like midwives. And so this is something that was supported with gardens, because in these communities, the climate change is something that is affecting as well in great measure, because the plants that they need are very far away, and they're older women who are not able to walk long distances, so they are not able to transfer those plants to their own gardens. So this is something that the project helped with, and helping them with plastic containers to be able to grow plants closer to them. And this is something that was also done in conjunction with women's organizations that since about 10 years ago, it was something that had been inactive, and we were able to reorganize them and reactivate them in that area in this way, or helping them get organized and coordinate within 27 communities. And at the same time, we were able to train them in regards to gender issues and the importance of participation. Here you can see in these photographs during the meeting that was held with all the women in these areas, where more than 75 women participated, so that they are able to create their own board and run for election with the board. You can see here the board, where you can see these are indigenous women, Misquitas, from all of these territories of Pasawats. And they were the ones that were part of all of this process and this project in regards of protecting women and young women and women in general from this indigenous groups.
Okay, I'm sorry. I realize we only have 2 minutes left, so we're going to do this really quick. I'm just going to highlight, these are it says number 1111, but it's 5 things that we'd like to highlight. The importance of integrating PSEAH in all activities, the importance of creating, these are the things that we found that we'd like to share with you. The importance of creating links with the local institutions and services, making sure that educational materials are available to everyone, signing the code of contact with project staff, and then visible oversight. And I'll hand it over to Eda to share something about this. Eda, solo tenemos 2 minutos.
De hecho, el tiempo es un
In
reto
fact,
y
time is
es un
always a
tema
challenge, and this is
tanto
also
de tanto que hemos logrado,
this is
pues,
something
hay
of
mucho
all the
que
things that
decir,
we have been
pero
able
en
to
corto voy a
have
tratar de
successes.
resumírmelo brevemente.
So it's really difficult to be able to summarize, but if we can please see
slide.
the next slide.
En temas de acción de género,
In regards to gender equality, we were able to have trainings
del territorio y
and
los líderes
including
locales
all the
y
different
religiosos.
area
En todo
and
este
regional
proceso,
leaders and religious
también se
leaders
les
as well.
facilitó
And so
materiales
this is something
con
that
temas
was able to
sensibles,
be
agentes,
provided
tanto digitales
was
como
in
físicos.
regards to general equality.
También los talleres de
And
género, la
also
participación de
these
los
workshops
líderes
and the
comunitarios
participation
de
of these
cada
leaders, of these regional local leaders,
comunidad beneficiario fue lo más
was something that was able to
importante.
benefit the community and
Next
was
slide.
of the utmost importance for us within this community. Next slide.
También los talleres de
Also, we
género,
were able to have
ver
different
la
workshops where you can see
participación
this
de
were
las mujeres,
gender
más que
equality
todo, pues,
related.
los
You can see the
temas,
participation
los
of women,
conocimientos más
especially
básicos
with the
para que ellas puedan
understanding of
tener
most
mejor
basic knowledge so that they
entendimiento
were
cuando
able to
lo que es
have
sexo,
better
género,
understanding
poder,
about what is
roles,
sex, what is
definitivamos así
gender,
de
what
esta
is
manera
power,
para
what
que
are
al
roles, and be
profundizar
able
el
to
tema ellas
present it
tengan
in
mejor
this way so that
conocimiento.
when we are talking about the subject, they have already some basic understanding. Next slide.
Ahí podemos ver
And here we can see
a Celsa Llorente. Ella es una
Celsa
política
Llorente.
nacional
She
acá en
is part
Nicaragua,
of the
territorio. Es una mujer
director of the Women's
indígena y es la
Commission of the local police. She's an indigenous woman,
jefa de la
and
comisaría
she is
de la
the
mujer.
chief
Entonces,
of the
ella
local
tuvo un
police, of
importante
women's local
rol
police. So she has a very
en
important
temas de poder hacer
role
unas
with
demandas en
our
caso
local
que
community in case
llegase a
there
ser
needed to be a
algún caso
report
de
or if there was
acoso
a
o
case
violación
of
contra las
harassment
mujeres,
or
las niñas.
rape
Ella da
or abuse
seguimiento y
against women or
acompañamiento
children.
en todo
So
el
she was
proceso.
able to come with us and provide us support throughout the whole process. Next slide.
Aquí podemos ver
And here we can see the young women were able to have a space also to be able to share new information and for them to also be able to obtain new information from Rachel, where we had a lot of information to provide them regarding their rights. So this was something that was specifically focused for young women to be able to give them information and so that they can understand how they're able to protect themselves. Next slide. We also have strong information that is provided with different campaigns and different posters that were provided to the different schools and public areas, churches, sports complexes, or community centers, police centers. Each of these posters had numbers where they could call to make an anonymous report through a phone call or WhatsApp. That in fact there was a phone number for Canada, Nicaragua, police. They had those different options where they were able to provide information in case something were to happen, any kind of problem regarding this subject. Next slide. And here you can see Cindy Mitchell. She's a young woman who works in these communities for the FIT project, and she's a facilitator. And you can see where she is giving a training for young girls in regards to gender issues. And she is a young woman who is an example to follow because she was not able to have this opportunity herself when she was young. And so she had to leave her area, her community, to be able to go to school and then come back to her community to be able to share her knowledge that she had gained with other young women in her community. And she is one of the best examples that they have in these communities because this FIT project and the project with children, the first thing they do is train their personnel with gender issues, and these subjects, these workshops, these were key during all of this process. Next slide.
Next slide.
And here you can see the coordination. These children projects, you can see always working so closely with the beneficiaries and with the employees, which has been so key to be able to share information on the subject. And so there's a lot of trust with all the local partners and communities as well.
Next slide. Okay, that was our presentation. I'm sorry we went a little over time there, but we're happy to discuss it further with you in the discussion time. Thank you. The last slide there. Tinky Pali, that's thank you in Mosquito.
Thank you so much, Adrian and Etta, and I'll say Tinky Pali to you as well. That was a really interesting presentation to hear a little bit about both of your FIT-funded testing projects and some of the approaches that you use to practically apply PSEAH during testing, especially talking about things like men's engagement, knowing that that aligns with FIAP. I think that's really beneficial, and I look forward to hearing more during our panel discussion. So I will pass it over to Dill to kick our panel discussion off with our 4 speakers.
Okay, thank you so much, Madeline. So let's start our panel discussion. I'm not going to take so much of time. And so now to the panel. We look forward to hearing more about the PSEAH strategies in a practical sense by expanding on what you said during all these presentations. And to start off, we want to hear about the policy side of PSEAH for your SMOs and the partner organizations. With that, my first question is, what was your experience when developing a PSEAH policy for your testing project? Did you have a PSEAH policy before receiving funding from FIT? Maybe Dawn and Karen can start answering the question and pass it to the other panelists.
Okay, sounds good. And thank you, Ada and Adrian as well. It's really fun. Dawn and I were exchanging messages, being like, oh, there's some similarities and differences. So even though we were testing different parts of the world. So anyway, sorry, Dill, that was not answering your question. So when we applied for FIT, we did not have a PSEAH in place, but we did have a policy on sexual harassment. And so we used that as our base, and then learned a lot from our partner. So, but we did develop Waterlution Canadian SMO. We developed our own PSEAH for our FIT proposal. And as we mentioned in our presentation, the local partner PSEAH was very robust. And so when we were working together, we felt well prepared for both Waterlution as the SMO. We felt our PSEAH was good and that it was something that we could execute on. And it was very much very complemented by the robust nature of our partners' PSEAH. So and it was a wonderful learning for us as well, because we could see firsthand those implementation pieces. So that's my answer on that. Dawn, anything else to add?
Well, I just think reinforcing the fact that whatever is in the policy has to be implementable, if that's correct phrasing there, and that the security of knowing that what we had on paper, that between us and our partner, that we most definitely would be able to implement that should it be necessary. And perhaps this will emerge in other places in the conversation this afternoon, but that all of the steps of the policy, the creation of the policy, the implementation of the policy, all of it, that those steps actually are part of the prevention. So much part of the prevention. Every element, the training is part of the prevention, the visibility of the communication. And so the policy itself as a standalone item is one aspect that all of the detailing actually works as prevention. And that is so important to be reinforced every step of the way, that there's nothing extraneous about any piece in a policy. All of it is for prevention, and not just responding to incidents when they occur. I think I'm passing the ball to Adrian and Etta now. There you go.
Yeah, Change for Children did have a PSEAH policy in place because of previous projects in the region, but we continue to develop it and work on the challenges. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Eda. ¿Quieres agregar algo?
Sí, de hecho,
Yes.
los socios locales
In fact, the associates were talking about how Nicaragua has a strong component, and this is something that we see from the very beginning. The partners that implement this here have a strong component that we had from the beginning. As soon as we hired staff, we had a special clause where no type of harassment or violence would be permitted with the employer, the employee, and the beneficiaries. So every employee, every partner has this very clear. Even the indigenous communities, they're currently working with the national police, with the communities, because this project has come to really strengthen them. They no longer tolerate any kind of abuse or harassment, because they've also been trained how to identify these different themes with their leaders, where they can identify when a child is being harassed or a woman is suffering violence. When it comes to human trafficking as well, they're able to identify, because we share a border with Honduras, and so we're very exposed. Little girls and women are really exposed to this. So they're already trained with this project, with the communities, and religion also plays a big aspect here, which is something that we've had to work with at every stage of the moment, and with the national police. And the government, the local government that works with the indigenous communities, has a board where there are 12 people here. Women form part of this board as well. And they know they have to work together, and they work with the police when it comes to these topics. So these particular topics have always been present for us since the project started. Everything that's been implemented, everything that's been coordinated, this is the first thing that is mentioned when we start. So this is something very strong. Thank you so much for sharing that. It sounds like both of your organizations and local partner organizations have some different experiences with the policy side of PSEAH and adapting those to your testing projects, which is really good to know. And it sounds like we're getting into some of the practical approaches already. And Eda, what you were saying sounds very powerful, to be working with local police forces to strengthen their PSEAH activities. So speaking of locally informed approaches, the practical sides of your PSEAH, Karen and Dawn, you were saying that PSEAH has to be implementable. Your policy has to be implementable. So I want to get into that a bit more. I know that both testing project methodologies and PSEAH approaches are very much informed by local context to ensure culturally sensitive and effective PSEAH. So your projects in Mozambique and in the Bosoas of Nicaragua have some similarities in terms of context, but obviously the contexts were quite different where you were testing. So I'm wondering, how did you effectively implement your PSEAH policy with partners and participants in contexts where local laws, social norms, or cultural practices may conflict with the policy? What strategies can be employed to address these challenges while maintaining sensitivity to the socio-cultural and the local legal context? So maybe, Eda, I'd like to start with you for this question, since you're joining as a local partner from Nicaragua on this call. So Eda, over to you.
Sí, efectivamente,
Yes.
trabajar estas temáticas
Working these topics in indigenous communities and remote communities, they lack a lot of knowledge when it comes to defending themselves in these particular topics. the first thing was giving them the knowledge. Then I can give an example. Little girls don't know when they're being harassed. If they tell them, oh, you're so beautiful, and they touch their cheeks or they touch their backside, they might think it's a game or they might think it's a compliment, and they don't realize that they're being harassed or abused. And just having the knowledge to be able to identify abuse and harassment is the basic knowledge that they need so that they can really face this. And especially with religion, when you come into a community and you first become sensitive to and you sensibilize the religious leaders, then you can reach the community, because then you'll have just one connection with that religious leader, and they'll be able to give some kind of words of knowledge or replica in these workshops, and the younger ones will listen to the religious leaders. So you can work with them in kind of bringing these topics to the front of their minds. The government in Nicaragua has a very strong policy right now about these things, and this project came to really link with the local police, and so that we can work on these things. The key was getting the police, getting the religious leaders on our side, and women being organized. Being able to organize women within these communities is a key factor, because they didn't have any kind of representation before. And so this involving women, involving elderly women who have been discriminated because of their age, has also been key. And they have so much knowledge about protecting younger women, and people who usually protect younger women are the grandmas and the mothers. And so if we can involve them in these workshops and these activities, and having these women who are coordinated in groups, this is how we can train other women. And then they can learn to identify harassment. And so these girls will know where to go, or if they're raped, then they will know who to talk to about that in a way that this isn't made public, always trying to take care of them psychologically, trying to take care of this woman or little girl who can talk about, and so that they can talk about these things without everybody finding out about this. Because as we know, this is something that ends up pointing to the victim and not to the abuser. So the basic thing is being able to be involved with the religion, with police, and we work a lot on those aspects.
I'll just add one other thing to what Eda said, and I won't go into detail, is around the relationships of this project staff with local people. This was a problematic area. Maybe others of you have had this experience as well. Is that when our relationships between, say, staff for projects that are coming into the region from outside, if they start up relationships with women in the local community, if it's a man, when is that a consensual adult relationship, and when is that there's a power differential, right? Because it's a person from outside, staff member, and we basically said in our policies and our code of conduct that that's not acceptable. However, these things happen. In addition, what about, we didn't tell you the story that much about Cynthia, but Cynthia ended up being hired as a technician through one of our projects to an external agency. And we had a really, Eda and others talked in detail with her about the fact that there is no requirement for you to have an intimate relationship with anyone to keep your job. And being clear with everybody about that. So those were things that within the Nicaraguan context we needed to talk about, but they were difficult and problematic because it's difficult to know where the lines are in these things.
For sure, that's really interesting. And yeah, it really speaks to the importance of understanding that local context, and our understanding of PSEAH may be different when we're talking about things like power dynamic. And Eda, what you were saying, it sounds like your approach to PSEA was very holistic and very community oriented, which is really powerful. So I'd like to pass it to Dawn and Karen. Is there anything that you would like to add about your experience with locally informed contexts for PSEA?
Yes, what came now is really inspired by Eda and Adrian's comments as well, that in addition to our local partner, Girl Move, who has this very robust and well-practiced and long-standing PSEAH policies in place that are also precocious marriage or early marriage is a big issue in the communities that we were working in, and so their policies also include that, signs of that, risk of that, or confirmed early marriages. So that there were other additional elements. We also we expanded our community engagement to complement the partnership we had with Girl Move Academy. And that was really interesting as well, to see other linguistic and practice approaches to how to address all of these subjects within the local context. And the other, and cited in our reports and continued in the ongoing impact slide that we jumped right through, it also refers to that we continue to do work in the community through another funded project subsequently, and with a widows association, because there are many widows who have many children and who are widowed very young, because within these early marriages there are people who marry many women, and the men often will be much older, and so then young girls are left with children and no one to take care of them. And so the Widows Association that we worked with also brought the leader of that. She had her own story that she uses as a way to access and inform others. And I think this really echoed with what Eda was bringing, and Adrian as well, the importance of having strong spokespeople who can speak about lived experience in a way that normalizes the use of language and breaking taboos around these happenings to try and prevent them. And so that elaboration, I mean, that growing of our local relationships reinforced all of the agreed, and that was one point I wanted to touch on. This was that when we did create the partnership agreement and putting it into practice, the extreme care, time, detail, and precision in making sure that our policies were compatible. That was so important for us to be able to have confidence to move forward in the implementation of the project. So then being able to further enter into the community with these other stakeholder relationships reinforced the strength of what we put into place. And that the training, and I think this is very similar as well, the training of our key people of the team that were involved in the delivery of the project, and then we had to train the trainer structure. And so that first level of capacity building for those 5 university educated women who already are a rarity in that context, how to empower them with language to be able to give permission for them to speak with the younger girls in a way that connected to them, because they were inspiring figures for these adolescent girls. They were rare, inspiring figures. And I think that reinforced, I know this already moves into the gender equality strategy, is that this is the foundation of what we're all trying to do. And so, of course, the PSEAH practices join into that. But the communication, the phone lines, the policy copies being available, the hyper presence of the policy and written, verbal, practical, visual, translated, locally adapted ways to have that especially be reaching non-female members of the community of all ages, which for us was really, really important and significant. To get the importance of the religious leaders as well is similar, to have that leadership in posture be reinforced and replicated by younger people of the religious community as well. So I don't know, Karen, if there's anything else that you want to add to that.
I won't, because I know there's other questions and you covered a lot. I just want to say one piece, which is that because we had such a strong partner in Girl Move, and because the first line, these 5 young university women that we were training, they had already received, a good amount of training, but they still got a lot because they were going to be working directly with us, obviously with the local partner. So they got training. So that was interesting. And however, when we worked after in Tanzania, one of our offshoots of what we did in Mozambique was replicating to the north in Tanzania. And our female facilitators there who worked a lot with even international organizations larger than our SMO. This was the first time that they had received that level of robust training from us. So there was a very good feedback loop in terms of reaffirming the strength of our partner. Not that we'd ever doubted the strength of our partner, but how much more confidence that gave our trainers, and that they felt supported and that they knew who to communicate with. So that's all. I know there's more questions, so I'll leave it there for now. It might come out more.
I'm just going to add one little bit here on that. I think that example that I remember very clearly, that conversation and that feedback, and that we can never assume that because of someone's position that they have the capacity already to be able to speak about this and share this with others. We can never assume that. We have to check at every step along the way. And it was shocking to us that the people that we were working with that in that situation in Tanzania had never received or been part of PSEAH training in any of the previous projects. And so that really checking our assumptions on every level it's so important. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much, Karen and Dawn. The things that you have done in very sensitive and very conventional backgrounds and context is very impressive. And with that, I would go to the next question. So this is about monitoring and evaluation. So now we want to hear more about the monitoring and evaluation and learning tools that you applied for PSEAH during your testing projects. And this is critical to monitor potential cases and follow up with effective support if needed. So SMOs often have smaller teams with limited resources. So my question is, what tools, systems, or approaches did you use to track and report PSEAH? This time, I like to start with Adrian and Ida, and then you can pass it to Karen and Don. Adrian or Ida, you can start.
Hi, maybe shall I let Eda start?
Yeah, of course, go ahead.
Sí, en cuanto al
Yes,
seguimiento,
in regards
trabajamos
to
de
follow-up,
manera
we worked
siempre
very
área
closely,
monitoreando
always
todos
monitoring
estos procesos
all of these
y en las
processes.
comunidades
And within the
se les
communities,
facilitó
we were able to
materiales
help facilitate with
disponibles,
material,
herramientas
tools
como
like
asesoría a la organización de mujeres
not just to the
coordinadoras
organization, but also to the
ellas en
coordinators of these
conjunto con los
women's
líderes
groups, and
comunitarios
together
y
with
el
the local
presidente, el
leaders and
gobierno
with the
territorial, que es
president,
el
with
que
the local
gobierna
government,
37
who governs the
comunidades del
37
territorio.
different
Y en
communities
cada
within that
comunidad
territory, and within
cuenta
each
una
community,
coordinadora de
then there's
mujer
one
y
coordinator
también un
of who
líder
is
de la
female and also
comunidad,
a
y que los
leader
dos
who's a
en
community
conjunto
leader,
le
so
dan
that they
seguimiento
together are
y
able to
reportan a la
have
policía si
updates
han habido
and can inform the
casos
police if there has
y que
been
también
any kinds
fueron
of cases.
entrenados en
And
esta
also they
temática
receive training within
y
all of these
tienen
topics, and we're able
nivel
to provide
conceptual del
follow-up
proyecto, así como
for
mi
the
persona
personnel
cuando
with the
visitábamos
project. For
comunidades
example, if
echábamos
I
el
would go
acta, si
visit,
había
then
algún
we would
reporte y
go
siempre a
through
la
any
par de esta
paperwork. Was there
coordinadora de
any
mujer
reports? And always
estaba una
working
mujer
together in
joven,
parallel with these women. There
estudiante,
will
puede
always
ser de
be a young
secundaria,
student, a young
que
woman, maybe
servía
like middle
a la
school.
coordinadora de mujer como la
And these
secretaria, la que llevaba
also would
todo
be,
eso.
like the note
Y
taker, like the
porque estas
secretary,
mujeres, las coordinadoras,
because these
ellas,
women, the
muchas de
coordinators,
ellas no pueden leer y
many of
escribir,
them, they're not
pero
able
tienen
to
mucha
read or
autoridad
write, but they
y
have a lot of
respeto de las
authority and a lot of
comunidades. Entonces
respect
las
within the
muchachas
communities. And so
que
these
están en el sistema
women who
educativo
are with
the educational system, then they would be there to help them for taking notes, any kind of meeting, women's notes. And so if they had to share any kind of situation that was happening, but thank God, we never had any kind of reports of these kinds because they were working very closely with these topics. And then they would be on the lookout that at any time that there would be a project that was providing training workshops with all of these communities that were beneficiaries. We were always in coordination with the National Police because we very well know that the authority is there, but they're lacking resources, financial resources, to be able to move to those communities that are very remote. They don't have the resources, the finances to be able to make this happen. And so we would help together so that they would be able to provide follow-up within these communities. And so it would be coordinating and that they would come with us so we could have these conversations with the coordinators and so that we can talk about all of these topics and how they could be able to provide this follow-up. But it was also important to be able to have the presence of this authority within the communities. And so in this way, it is how we were able to talk about these themes, these topics, and sharing these banners, these tools, and also any other tools with the different figures about at what moment, how also there can be prevention with these topics and numbers, emails. In fact, with a children's organization, local government, and phone numbers. In fact, with these and flyers or information material, we had the information with Lorena, and she said, well, I never got a call where any kind of these problems. And this is good because then it meant there was no problem. And so then they also have those contacts beyond, not just locally. And so this was a very good tool also because then having that visibility about the topic.
I would just add that, as you can understand from what Ed is explaining, it was a very community-based and relationship-based. So it wasn't tracking things. Now that works in a kind of smaller scale context. I mean, it might be different for organizations that are working in a larger context. So just to add that caveat, that this seemed to work well for us because of the relationships and the close relationships with community and inside the communities, but it might not work in all contexts.
All right. Does Karen or Dawn want to share something?
Yes. It's so wonderful to hear also how other people are doing this. It's wonderful to hear the stories from Ed and Adrian. It's really, we continue to learn. So thank you for this opportunity to share our learnings and also to continue to learn. The way that we monitored and the structures in place for reporting, because also within the time period of this project, there were no incidents to report. But the structure of monitoring was built into all of the feedback loops that we had with the training. So we started with the first negotiation between us and Girl Move Academy. And so within that, Girl Move Academy has an internal reporting and monitoring process where on an annual basis with all HR candidates and also all employees continually have to feed back about how the policy is being put into practice, any observations or improvement suggestions for improvement, etc., to the policy. So that happens on an internal basis annually. And then with our project team, the full complete training that have been translated, of course, and contextualized for the local territory we were working in. And then with the Girl Movers, who were our facilitation team, after every single session they had with the girls, we checked in with them against the signs, verbal and nonverbal signs that they were picking up on and perceiving. And so that element of, and this is interesting because the level of literacy in basic terms in terms of being able to read and write is a question, but also literacy around this subject, these having vocabulary, having adequate means of expression around the subjects that are treated within PSEAH policies. So that those feedback loops were built into the way that we monitored with our team, and then bringing those to the sessions with the young people, normalizing the conversation around this, so that then the girls became multipliers of that in a very it was proactive and also very natural and age appropriate way for them within their family and community circles. And so that those built-in intentional mechanisms for feedback and reporting all the way through the testing process were certainly very important. So I have here note that the timeliness and the frequency and the nonverbal and the nonverbal behaviors to be able to be tuned into and observe. The whole structure to reduce occurrences. Oh, and then I'm sorry. So just to reinforce as well that the connections to the local police and the prosecutor's office and the social assistants, all of those agencies were built in with reporting structures through our partnership with the local partners. So those channels, as well as the independent telephone line, the whistleblower protection, having a way to reinforce and protect whoever it is that should make a claim, an incident report. All of those structures being really clearly communicated in different ways, visually and with text, and with local language being considered, reinforcing all of the policy that was built in the partnership structure. So just wanted to add those points in complement to what Edda and Adrian already brought. Karen, is there anything else?
Hi there, my screen just froze. No, I think we're good. I'm looking at the time and I know there's more questions. So I think that was very thorough.
Great, thank you for sharing that. It's interesting to hear your approaches from your local partner organization, both SMOs, because there's some similarities with the community-based approaches to monitoring and evaluation of PSEAH, which is really interesting that that's coming across. But some differences as well in adapting to those local contexts. So to continue on with our next question, I want to get into how your PSEAH policies have evolved over time. So with changing contexts, new learnings, and organizational capacities, PSEAH policies and approaches can and do evolve over time. So I'm wondering, how have your PSEAH policies evolved over time? And what practical approaches and compliance measures have you implemented with your local partners or with your SMO to align with these changes? So Dawn and Karen, you said you're on your third iteration now of your PSEAH for Waterlution. So I'd like to start with you for this question to provide more on that.
Sure, no problem. I feel like some of the things you've asked, I feel like might be repetitive because we mentioned that. Yeah, we just, as you keep learning, so you're learning so much. And so then you start to see how you can enhance your policy. And so we wouldn't go and change a policy in the middle of a project. So, you know, we were taking notes in our first iteration, but wanting to make sure that we were offering consistency of what was put out in the policy and what Dawn mentioned earlier about all the very fine-tuned details that we worked out with our partners. So it was very important to be consistent while also taking note of what we would like to improve on. Then we made some improvements. And then, as I mentioned, that in our project working with UNICEF in Lebanon, we really learned a lot about it was kind of like they elevated the game, not because what we had before wasn't good, but there was just a level of detail that we needed to develop further, and we were ready. So what I think is really important for those that are on the call that maybe are earlier in, I would assume that maybe people on the call are earlier in their PSEAH development, is develop something that you can implement and you can execute, and then learn And then at appropriate moments, that is the time, whether it be annually or, like everybody would have their own systems. And the other thing I would say was that we started up in our training materials, really focusing on the local context, and that we bring in case studies. So we have like a workshopable moment in our training. So it's like people, and they have, when we do our training, people need to get the case studies in advance so that we're asking them some questions before they enter into the interactive training, so that they're not having that time for reflection. And so the more closely aligned that our training can speak to our specific audience, we find that the dialogue and the examples that are coming out as we workshop that in the training feels just as close to reality in the context as possible. So we've gotten, that has been part of our iteration. So not only the policy, but how that's complemented in the training. Dawn, is there anything you'd like to add to that? No? Okay.
Okay, thank you. We'll move to Adrian and Etta. Maybe I'd recommend keeping this response mainly to one person, just in the interest of time.
I'll just say, similar to the experience of Waterlution, I think we started with quite a generic policy that we kind of got from someone else and adapted a bit. But as we've gone through different projects, we've continued to adapt, and both the policy itself and how we share that with our staff and participants by making it more and more contextualized.
Great, thank you so much, Adrian. So Dill, if you want to continue on with the last question.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Madeline, and thank you all. It's very insightful answers I'm hearing here. So this is our final question. So FIT specifically funds small or medium-sized organizations with more limited funding opportunities who often face additional resource constraints and have smaller staff size. So my last question is, what advice would you offer to other SMOs and partners creating a PSEAH policy with limited resources, and possibly for the first time? And I'm expecting a very short answer, and I like to open this to everyone, so anyone could start answering this question now.
All right, I can answer. I'll try and be very quick, which is get your board involved. I know some FIT funded projects are through universities, but our board helped a lot there. It's in their best interest to make sure that it's robust. And very similar to what Adrian said, is like we worked off of something and then we adapted it, but don't find out what your level of don't skimp on this. You need it to be good, but it needs to be implementable. And so, it's worth the effort. Looking at the work that we're doing, it is an alignment with the goals that all of us have been drawn to FIT and our wider work that doesn't, we're all working on gender equality pieces. It is in your organization's best interest to have a PSEAH, and that it can be adapted. You can update it. It probably, you'll look back 3 years later and be like, oh my gosh, what we didn't know then. That's okay.
Listen to your partner about where there are challenges, because that will inform how you need to adapt as you continue to work in that region and other regions. Really listen.
I don't think I have anything to add. Eda, ¿tienes algo que quieres agregar a esto?
No, solamente de que
No, just
siempre
you should always contextualize and respect the culture and the language of every community or territory or country in which we are implementing these projects. Because if we go with whatever workshop or theme, we always have to do that in the level of the beneficiaries and in their own mother tongue so that we can really convey that message. Because otherwise it's like we're not really giving them anything. It's just repeating another workshop. If we do that in a language that isn't their own, it'll never reach them. We need to respect and contextualize. We need to respect their language and have the team or the staff be preferably local so that people can identify with those other people in our staff. Just that. For sure. Thank you so much for those responses. I'm hearing lots of trending themes about locally informed approaches to PSEAH, which I've learned a lot from you during this event. So thank you all for sharing your insights. So we do have a few minutes for questions. So we'll now open the floor for the audience to ask questions. We encourage you to ask questions to our presenters by adding them into the chat in either English, French, or Spanish. And we'll try to get to a few of them before wrapping up our event. So I'm seeing one that has come in the chat earlier, and maybe this, we'll start with asking this to Dill. So there was a question on requirements and if reporting mechanism for PSEAH is equal to complaint mechanism. So Dill, do you want to start off this question if there's no other questions for presenters at this point?
Yes, thank you so much, Madeline. In my understanding, yes, reporting mechanism and the complaining mechanism is quite similar, so I would say it is the same. And I'll try to give you a very short answer, so if anyone else can ask any more questions, it's up to you now. I think you have a question. Oh, no.
There is a comment
Yes.
that came through in the chat that I can read out loud. So this person was saying, I appreciate Dawn's comment on never assuming that people have PSEAH training. And the follow-up question to that is, how did you determine how much people know, given that people are likely to overstate this? So maybe Dawn, we'll start with you for this one.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for the question. And it's good to know that message came out strong. In the training that we've developed for the PSEAH, we do it in a workshop format that permits for that knowledge transfer through experience to be shared. And so through that, we can kind of help sort of dilute the posturing around, oh, I should know this. 5 minutes before coming on the call, I studied the language. We're able to actually, through the structure of the training that we've developed, we're able to hear and make a safe space for people to talk in a genuine way about what they do and don't know and what they have as lived experience through this. And so for us, the training is really important to address that properly and with care.
Thank you, Dawn. Does anyone else have any insights on this, if you'd like to add anything? And if not, that is okay. So if there are any final questions, you're welcome to add those into the chat. But if not, I would like to do a bit of event wrap up and to start off by saying a huge thank you to our speakers, Adrian, Etta, Karen, and Dawn. I've learned a lot today. I think you've all provided some really valuable insights about how SMOs specifically and local partner organizations have very effectively, it sounds like, implemented practical approaches to PSEAH with smaller sizes and more limited resources. So to close off the event, we've included some associated resources on the prevention of sexual exploitation, abuse, and harassment in the chat, including information from DIGNA, which I know was mentioned earlier in the chat, and that's the Canadian Centre of Expertise on the Prevention of Sexual Exploitation and Abuse. So we encourage you to have a look at those resources. As well, we would love to hear your thoughts on the session. So a short poll will pop up on your screen momentarily. And we kindly ask that you fill that out to provide your feedback so that we can improve our future events for you. As well, we'll include our social media handles on the screen in a moment. So if you're curious to see more about the FIT program and learn more about us and about these testing projects, you can have a look at our social media platforms or our website. So thank you so much, everyone. Tinky Pali to all of our speakers. Y muchas gracias.